Hi, this is David with EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. Today, I've got a special guest, Eli Braha with EVectriFi, in the studio with me. How you doing, Eli?
I'm doing great. Thank you, David.
So you and I met in Florida last year, just kind of by chance. We were both interested in what Greenland Tech was doing,
Correct.
and I'm proud to say that since I interviewed him on my show, their stock has gone up 40%.
No way. Fantastic.
I call it the EV World News podcast effect.
Okay, so when
And
we have our IPO, I'm definitely going to be on your show.
yeah, so I just thought you might like to go that. I really liked Ray. He was really good on the show, and we had a great chat about a number of different things. And they've done some interesting. Did you see they did that? They're doing that spinoff. They're doing a dividend spinoff.
Yes, I did see that. I did see that.
Yeah. But anyways, so tell me a little bit about Electrify. What do you guys do?
So, EVectriFi is a minority woman-owned charging station company. The minority actually is a Hispanic minority. She lives in New York City. She's New York-based, and we have been putting together a company with her. She had invested some money, so did we, alongside her, and we started an EV charging company. Uh, Ronnie, one of the partners here, is a aerospace engineer, so a lot of benefit to the business based on the software that we use, and of course his ability to manage hardware as well on a very on a different level. So I've seen him do things that are really very complicated, and he's been able to really put things together in a very efficient manner. Also gives us the ability when we get challenged with different types of projects or different installations or bid processes, where his strengths in that relationship as well. So Ronnie's been doing an excellent job. As I mentioned to you, he's an aerospace engineer, which I don't believe that other people in the industry have that. So having him on that end of it and having a minority woman operate the business on the other side of it gives us a lot of different levels to step over or get in front of that are more helpful to the business itself.
Nice, nice, nice. And
And
so you guys do a lot.
what we've been
Go ahead.
doing is we basically have a line of charging stations under the Electrify brand, and those charging stations have the capacity to start even from residential and goes all the way up to a high level supercharger unit DCFC.
Oh, nice, nice. Is there a geographic concentration of this?
So, right now where our concentration is, even though we're licensed to do business, or we have operations in the state of California, the state of Florida, and New Jersey, as well as New York State. We actually do a lot of business up and down the Eastern Seaboard, and coincidentally, we do some business out of the West Coast, out of the California operation. So the business that we're doing now is really mostly in the states that are not really aligned with monopolies, where we can have the advantage of different grid pricing. So, technically, it works a little bit more better in terms of pricing on the energy itself when we work with non-regulated states. So there are right now on the eastern seaboard roughly 18 unregulated states. That gives us the flexibility of trying to press pricing so that we become competitive that way. We like to think of ourselves as a charge point operator, where we not just unit but try to have ownership interest in the unit itself, either full ownership or a hybrid model with the person who owns the property itself.
I've had folks on my show from the EU, and they use the term charge point. And in Europe, charge point simply refers to any charging station. Here in the United
That
States,
is
sometimes it gets mixed up because there is a company called ChargePoint.
yes, yes, but as a charge point operator, which basically person that really is controlling the station itself, the unit itself. Charge point is a brand, by the way, absolutely.
So when you're discussing monopoly, you're talking about monopoly of like there's only a single power company in the state,
Yeah, for
or
instance, in the state of Florida, you would have Florida Power and Light, which really controls pretty much everything when it comes to energy in that state. Well, there's Pico too, but there are different areas. But the high concentration of what Florida Power and Light does L is very it's you're working within their confines of their requirements needed when putting in charging stations, and there's you're always going through them, and the monopoly itself, you can understand the firewalls that you would have to get through every time you're doing a job.
Okay. It's interesting to see that. Is there some special? So when you put in, first of all, who are the types of customers you put in chargers for?
So we like to believe that because of my background was more real estate related or real estate centric. So my relationships are with a lot of ownership of real estate that are either shopping center developers, strip malls, strip centers, malls, and then we work with some institutional people such as hospitals, hotels, and those locations are would be dynamic for us to put our
Got it.
station is something that we by the way, I need to mention to you that we also do a lot of government contract bidding, a lot with municipalities, and we're bidding some right now in the Midwest, which was not really something that I thought we'd get, but it looks like we have a good possibility of gaining access to doing some work in the state of Ohio. Is more for locations off the highway, more Navy type work. And we're looking at that. We're also doing a job we're bidding a job in Fulton County. We're bidding a job in Cripple Creek, um, Colorado. We're bidding another job in New York City. And we just finished bidding a job out of Boston.
Nice, nice.
So
It,
that's
it's
that's where we
interesting to
are.
see. It's interesting to see that that's a pretty broad spread. So when I think
Right.
of things in the EV space, as far as charging, you've got people that have home chargers, you have chargers, say, at your work, then you have chargers that might be going in, at a current gas station or truck stop. Then you see how Tesla pretty much puts them all at grocery stores. At
So
least
the
that's what been
grocery,
my
the
experience.
yeah, it's interesting that you say the grocery store. There was a grocery store chain that approached us with the intention of our installing DCFC chargers at certain locations. We're looking at those locations to be something that could be very beneficial to us if we're able to get it. The big problem with those type of jobs is that the infrastructure required to bring in the power to those locations are sometimes the big hurdle in terms of timing. And the solution is anywhere between a year to a year and a half of timing for the actual, the grid to arrive to the location so that we can actually do that type of install.
Yeah, I'm aware that the pull that's done on a bank of level 3 chargers may be more than the grocery store that they may be in the parking lot of. It's potentially greater pull if it was actually full.
That is correct. So from the standpoint of bringing in that energy, it's always a separate service that has no involvement with the shopping center itself or the retail stores that are located there. So it's a different service and obviously requires separate metering and a different service completely.
Nice, nice. Well, let's talk about a couple things that we had for topics today. So one of the big things that I see, so most of your early adopters in EVs are homeowners. They're probably technology first adopters. They're probably always getting the newest phone and all that. And most of them are homeowners, have a garage, had a place to install a charger. But the big segment of the space that I think it's more challenging for is people in apartments. You want to tell me what your thoughts are on
So
solutions for
so
apartments?
so let's take New York City just as so in New York, or especially let's take Brooklyn. You have a concentration of multifamily that were built without any kind of underground garages. So which means that the challenge for New York, who's the cities itself require a lot of charging units because the city itself is the issue is the carbon neutral factor in New York. So you're taking New York where you have a local law 97, which is a carbon neutrality where they're buildings to be able to work in conformity and not throw off too much carbon. This, by the same token, now they want you to bring in electric power to be able to charge cars. By doing that, it's causing the market to have an issue, because if a building owner would want to put a charging station in, he would bring up his carbon footprint. So New York City dynamically is trying to figure out a way to carve out the carbon that's going to be used for EV charging versus carbon that's being put out for wasted energy. But New York City is looking for the opportunity to try and install charging stations on the street. And we just did a request for information for New York, trying to give them the support that they needed to evaluate the best intention to put those charging stations. But New York, as a city, and many, especially that have an older infrastructure, it's not that they don't have the power available. It's just that getting the power to the locations that are needed for the charging stations are going to require a big lift. And so they're trying to figure out different solutions using municipal parking lots, which there are not many in New York. So they're thinking about using Parks Department to use their parking lots at the Parks Departments to use that. They're trying to do a side or street parking where they enable at least one or two charging stations on each street, so that you can come there and just use it isolated for EV charging cars. But in general, it's a complex requirement, and the city has to figure it out, because obviously the pollution that it's emanating using combustible engines become a nightmare to New York, and they have to figure out a solution to get it done. So they're using people like ourselves and other charging try to figure out the best solution.
My understanding is that New York City specifically has a really low rate of EV adoption because of the fact that there's not places to charge, things like that. But my understanding is in New York City, not that many people necessarily own cars like the rest of the country, that it's more common to use other forms of transportation.
It's it's there's a lot of truth to that. And so the way New York is trying to figure, they're going to have different types of pricing when you're bringing in your car, using congestion pricing, things like that, that are going to cause people not to drive into the city and use mass transit. However, I mean, at the end of the day, you have 8.5 million people in the city, and no matter what, any way you want to figure out the footprint, there's still too many vehicles driving around. I mean, just like we work with Taxi and Limousine Commission, and I can tell you that they have close to 20,000 cars just driving along looking for a fare. So, that sounds like nothing, but New York itself, I mean, I don't know in square miles, but I know it's not a very big footprint. And Brooklyn, as a residential, bedroom community to the city itself, has about 4 million people. So it's one of the, I
Wow.
think, fourth or fifth largest city in the country. So no matter what, we don't have the technology that's available yet to actually deliver that. So there are different ways that energy will be delivered. One is going to be, off the street charging. Another is going to be in the parking lots, in garage parking lots, and then you have in the municipal parks itself. And other opportunities might be, mobile charging, where you physically show up with your truck and give a charge to a vehicle that needs a charge, off the grid.
Well,
So
that
there are
would be
different,
interesting.
yes. So we are working on something right now like that with New York City, and we're hoping that they accept our product. They're
You
actually
know,
working with us on designing something.
I saw something interesting recently because one of the challenges, let's say we were going, let's not talk about New York City. Let's say we were doing an apartment complex in Houston or Dallas, and they don't have parking garages. They're all parked throughout the parking lot, and a lot of them. When you're in Texas, you have those little hangars they have, or you know, things to protect you from the sun.
Canopies,
Yeah,
right? The
and
canopies.
but my thought and a solution I've seen put out in California is just doing level one chargers. And the interesting thing about
So
this,
I can tell you that the level one charges in California, because we actually had a meeting in Los Angeles,
mhm,
and what we found out is that there are three problems. One is that nobody has the time to wait, and nobody has the there's enough of a trickle of a charge that would really make the difference. And my understanding is that Los Angeles would like to rip out a lot of the heads of those machines and upgrade them with level two chargers so that they're able to get people to where they need to be. Otherwise, people are getting frustrated using public charging stations that are not filling the bill. And this
My
is
thought was more like
another
this.
issue.
It- Now, obviously, most people don't drive more than 30 miles a day. Okay. Now, there are people who, outliers who drive a lot more than that. Okay. If people drive a lot, most people don't drive a great deal. But typically, a level one still gives you about 5 miles of charge every hour. And that's
I
kind
don't
of
even
the,
think that. I
you don't
wouldn't
even
even
think it's
think
that?
it would give you that level. I mean, I don't know anybody who's actually producing a level one unless you're actually buying it on Amazon, from China that it's coming in. But that's really not people are even looking at. I mean, if anything, I mean, I could tell you from the way we support level two charging, and our residential charging unit is a 50 amp unit that works at 12 kilowatts per hour. So, and
Mhm.
that's, that in itself is our lowest level charging station. But, anybody who owns an EV car will tell you that the hardest thing for them to do is wait to get their full charge. And, full business is about 80% of the
Right.
actual full capacity.
Yeah.
And most people start at around 20%. People don't show up with a car that has usually less than 20%. So when we look at a charge, we're looking from 20 to 80% of the actual energy required. So that depends on what kind of charging station you're using and what the output is. Another thing is that people don't really understand that when you go outside of a home and you charge location, sometimes you'll have 5 or up to 15 units there. And when they start to get busy, the unit itself won't give you the full capacity of charge that's capacity. So it'll basically share the load with the other charging stations so that everybody's getting some of the charge all of the time. But the software itself actually can determine that.
Right. Right. Yeah. If the whole place is full, you get a slower charge than what if you were the only car there.
Well, it depends on the software. I mean, our software can deliver charge based on first in, first out, or if you're a member of a particular, that let's say that condo location, and somebody comes off the street to charge at that area, you would get priority as a member of the condo association, or you're living in that building, or you're parking in that garage, so you'll have you recognize it that it gives that ability to charge that way. The software in itself is just a fantastic product that we offer.
That's nice. That's nice. One of the things I wanted to discuss is vehicle to grid. And this is kind of interesting because in certain parts of the country, particularly in California, they have this huge amount of renewable energy that's mismatched with when the grid needs energy. And I just lost Eli. Hopefully he'll be back here in a second. There you
You
are.
there you are. Okay. Can you repeat that, please?
Okay, yeah, you went out for a second. Yeah, so I was saying while you were gone that there's a mismatch as to when, so, solar is strong between 11 and 2, wind is strong between midnight and 2 a.m., and in California, they really need a lot of power from the grid between 4 p.m. and about 8 p.m. And
So we work with a particular customer that's out of Texas that's created, like you say, vehicle to grid, and they're doing an off grid type of a product where they're actually storing energy in a battery facility, and then the energy gets outputted through our units themselves. So the vehicle to grid model is actually a very good system to pull energy at the off hours. So what they're basically doing is they're taking the energy and during the off peak or evening hours, loading it to their battery where they do the distribution, where people are, paying the differential between the day rate and the night rate, and they're earning their money just on that delta. So that's a powerful system, and that's seems to be a good way that the vehicle to grid system is actually benefiting people right now in the business itself.
I think once it gets worked out in some areas like California, you'll start seeing the power company be able to take power from your car during peak times and then fill it back up, when the energy's cheaper, and you'll get some delta there of making a little bit of money for being able to
Well,
participate.
so we're working, coincidentally, we're working with one client right now in New Jersey that actually is using their solar energy. Uh, I don't know if they're going to receive enough of their solar energy, depending obviously the time of the year, but
Right.
they're also using that, selling it back to the utility company, and then buying back their energy. So they're making the differential or saving the difference on what the energy is costing them and what they're selling it back to themselves for.
Yeah, the
So
only reason
there's
I like
something.
talking about this is because I get so many people that are always trying to tell me the grid will never be able to handle all the EVs. And you and I both know everybody's not switching to an EV next week, and that's what
Well,
people make it seem like.
so yeah, but this, there's a whole issue about these the right way to go, and I can tell you that from 22 to 23, the market went up 20% in 22, and it went up 47% in sales of new cars in 23. So this year, everybody's saying, "Oh, EVs, they're not doing that well," but the reality is that they're still slated to growth of more than 20% for 24. So, and I know that there's a lot of vehicle companies that are producing their batteries that are not range that they originally anticipated, or that they all thought was going to happen. And those companies are trying to figure out a much more a much better battery than what they have. I mean, I saw that Mercedes said that in 26 they're going to stop producing EV cars, and they're going to go back on track in 2030. So they're obviously re-engineering their battery so they can get more range out of it. Versus, I have friends that have bought the cars, and they're saying that the inefficiency in the battery range is really a big deterrent on them wanting to continue to keep that car, versus the Tesla where they're getting a much longer range. So that
Well,
seems to be. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I was just going to say, I remember hearing Elon Musk said, "Look, if we wanted to make cars with 1,000-mile range, we can. It's just that at the moment, it's going to tag an extra $40,000-$50,000 onto the price of the
So
car." But
yeah, it's technology just has to build into the time, and sometimes we're a little bit ahead of where we need to be. So it's a process of making the product reasonably priced in order to offset the cost of it. And obviously, the more you produce, the less expensive the product's going to end up being. But we're
right
we're a
now,
big believer in a better battery.
oh yeah, it seems to me like battery tech is kind of where computer tech was 20 years ago. Remember, it used to be every 2 years the power of computers doubled, and right now, well, I don't know necessarily that they're doubling, but the price of lithium ion batteries is halving about every 2 years, and it's really gone down a lot in the past years, and they expect it to have again in the next 18 months.
Right.
And it's crazy. So what'll happen is be more affordable, but you also have these other technologies coming online with the sodium ion batteries and the solid state batteries and things like that. Now, the sodium ion battery doesn't hold as much juice as the lithium ion battery, but it's much cheaper to produce, and it doesn't have any flammable properties.
I know that a lot of the batteries that are being created right now, they're trying to figure out how it's going to be able to charge faster. And so the next issue becomes, okay, let's assume the batteries take a longer range, and let's say the battery prices come down further. Question becomes, how fast or how long is going to make me sit there to get my battery to charge to 80% fast enough? So a lot of people have the anxiety of waiting around, waiting for their battery to be charged. So, one thing is to wait for the charging station to be available, and the other one is to make sure that it's a fast enough charge that I can get out of there quick enough so I can get to where I got to be. So
I got a weird
that
question for
issue,
you.
go ahead.
So with large trucks, especially if you live remote, a lot of times you'll have a pickup truck or a larger vehicle with two gas tanks on it, right? Why couldn't EVs have that battery segmented so that you could charge on both sides when you were at a fast charger and charge at
Simultaneously?
once? Yeah.
I, I can't answer that question, but I can answer. I mean, I can say that the batteries themselves that they're putting into the trucks, or to get what they call extended range, they're basically doubling the capacity of battery, or somewhat doubling the capacity in order to get a longer range. But obviously, the truck is heavier, and depending on where they're driving and how long they're driving it for, it's going to substantially reduce the mileage. So that's the other thing. I've also been experienced with some people where they're saying that, my truck is so heavy and I had to change the tires. I couldn't get it up the lift because the lift couldn't handle the amount. So that's enough. That's but thing we don't even think about, and that
Right.
becomes problematic. So there's a whole, but nobody's going back to the time of the days where the iron horse was created, where a car would not get you to the next station, so you put two 5-gallon tanks in the truck in the back of the car, so that if you ran out of gas, you were able to continue your journey. But think about the whole infrastructure being built out 100 plus years ago. It was the same circumstances, just a different time. And
Um,
technology definitely is going to, the infrastructure will definitely be there. It's a matter of a process of time, and the technology will get better. And 10 years from today, having this conversation is going to sound like an antique show.
right. Oh, I get that. We probably already look like an antique show as it is. But
Yes.
you know how a 100 kilowatt hour battery is considered to be long range in most vehicles, right? Well, I
Right.
saw something recently in Norway. They made a semi-tractor snowplow that had 1,000 kilowatt hour battery for clearing mountain passes.
Well, that's
And
similar to what your friend from Greenland is doing. He's doing all that heavy lifting product. Am I right?
yeah, and I think his batteries are about half that. They're about 500 kilowatt hours. They're big. To last nine
But
hours in a day.
yeah, but the question is how much energy is really being sucked out of that when it's actually doing all the power work. One thing is to run the battery. The other thing is when they start pushing, dirt, it starts to really, reduce the amount of battery timing on it.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that was interesting is that when the vehicle is sitting, the battery's not really doing anything. And which was a little different than we using a diesel vehicle. You pretty much just leave it running
Right.
all the time. And
But
I think that that was a lot of
quality
their
of what's
benefit.
but the diesel itself is just, it's just not it's pollution. It's just too much pollution.
So,
So,
so you want to talk a little bit about some things that EVs are now doing that are better than internal combustion engine vehicles.
I
Let's
mean,
discuss that.
I was listening to a podcast coincidentally with I forget who the scientist was or the physicist was, but he was claiming that the amount of particles out of a combustible engine, even though they're so microscopic and the ingestion of all that, even if it goes through the filter of your nose or through your throat, is really just still polluting your bloodstream, where you're not seeing it immediately, but it's just a process that takes place over time, where it's just no matter what, we have to get rid of the combustible engine vehicle over a period of time. I'm not saying everything happen, and I know there's a big resistance to it by people that want to live by a gas car, but eventually everybody will see that the EV market is the way to go. And this is just this it's the old story of my mother when I gave her an Apple phone for Mother's Day. She did everything to resist using it. Now she doesn't move without having that phone in her hand. So it's just a period of time where people just accept it and get trained to do it. But once they do, it does work better. There's no question about it.
Well, the United States is, and this is interesting because usually we're one of the leaders in the world in just about everything. And outside of Tesla, if you look at US adoption compared to China and Europe, we're 10 years behind.
Well, don't forget, Europe has something that the United States doesn't want to do. They use these mini nuclear power plants that give them,
Mhm.
effectively energy as opposed to the United States. So using that and having that infrastructure available to them gives them the benefit of just putting in more electric vehicles. And by the way, it is the right way to go. and they probably just can make quicker decisions. These is, all of Scandinavia today is pretty much EV operated. And, so Toyota is saying, oh, I don't know if the EV way is the right way for us, but it does probably 70% of its business in countries that don't have even good electricity to run their own, their residences, or to run their industry. So you take a country like Bangladesh, for argument's sake, where you have 170 million people plus, and every other, I would say not every other, probably 85% of Bangladesh cars are Toyotas. So if there's no infrastructure for using an electric vehicle, and they're stuck using gas gas combustible engine vehicles, then they're going to have to say that my market is those countries. It's all of the continent of Africa. It's all of Asia, subcontinent of Asia, and those countries just don't have the capacity to put EV in there. I'm sure they would love it, but they just don't have it yet, and they're not nuclear countries, so they're stuck with using gas created cars, and Toyota doesn't want to lose that market share. So
I've seen some interesting arguments on this. In a lot of these countries, the gas stations are so sparse because there's not really a big auto community that it's more common to be able to find an electric plug. But you're right, because I've been looking at some solar projects in a couple of countries in Africa, and those countries have less than half one of them has half the population has access to electricity, and one has like 64%. I did a show
they
recently on Kenya, or I'm sorry, Ethiopia. Ethiopia is banning the importation of gas cars, but only 2 out of 1,000 people have access to a car at all,
so
and,
they
and most of them
right.
are taxis. Yeah, and so it really now e-bikes are a common thing in the third world, and they're
E-bikes
big.
are, yeah,
People
but
here
there's
don't ride
there's a
bikes.
problem with the lithium batteries. That's another issue. But maybe in their structure of the way they live in terms of their homes, it maybe doesn't have the same that it has in a city like New York, where somebody has their EV bike being charged in their apartment and the thing goes on fire, and unfortunately you have a lot of deaths because of that, or also property damage, etc. So in those areas, that may be their only choice.
No, right? No, I get it. It's just kind of interesting to see. So, what? Tell me a little bit about what kind of trends you're seeing. What kind of trends are you seeing with charging?
I believe I see. Okay, so right now you have close to a 500,000 residential charging stations. I mean, I haven't seen the
Oh,
numbers
wow.
very recently, but you only have probably around 60,000 public charging stations. And those public charging stations, I would say at least half of the minimum of half of them are either really low level one or level two charging stations that are not giving the public the ability to want to use them. And so
Right.
that means that driving themselves to a fast charging station that might have a larger output, because some of the DCFC stations just don't give you the amount of power that you think you're going to get. If it's a 350 kilowatt station, it's not really putting out 350 kilowatts, because most cars won't accept 350 kilowatts. So there, I guess the computer in the car just tells them to take it all the way down to 105 kilowatts. So because I mean, in my mind, when I've gone to a public charging station to charge my vehicle, I never get more than a certain amount of output of power from the unit itself. Even if it says it's a 350 kilowatt unit, I've never gotten over 110 kilowatts, which was surprising to me. So that said, it's now, I don't know if it's because I'm sharing power with the other chargers, or I don't know if the car company itself is not allowing it to charge more than that because maybe the battery or what have you. I'm not really sure myself, but I can tell you that happens all the time. But DC charging stations are a good thing for the public, except you need so many more. We are right now, for every one EV car that's on the road, I would say you probably have. I'm sorry, for every one EV charging station, I'm talking about a DCFC
Level
station. There
three.
are probably
Yeah.
at least 35 vehicles trying to use that station. It's available if it's available, and the government would like it to be for every three EV cars, there should be one DCFC station. So we're a long way from home in terms of getting to the point where we have enough where the market is saturated so that there is no reduction of or loss of time or EV insecurity, let's call it that, of people being able to get somewhere.
Nice, nice. All right. Well, we've pretty much used up all of our available time, Eli. Anything
Great.
last things you'd like to say to our audience?
No, I just want to thank everybody for listening, and I appreciate your time. And David, you've been a good friend to us, and I'm so happy to be on your show. And hopefully, you'll have the opportunity to have Ronald Waingord, who's the main guy here that handles all the EV infrastructure for the company, who can be speaking to you about some technical matters not that proficient with.
Oh, that'd be
So
all
that
right. That'd be
that can be
great.
helpful.
I'd
Thank
welcome
you.
it.
Thank you for everything.
All right, folks. I'm
Appreciate
gonna
it.